been a while. I did not design that. I know Hayden didn't design that as well. But yeah,
I
another
don't even
month.
know how to design.
Uh, yes, another month break from Downstage. Uh, Apparently, I was on a month break because I got hit up at work. Uh, Surprisingly enough, one of the shows I ushered, is now moving to Broadway. So that's actually great to hear. Um, During the time though, I caught up with some movies that came out. Mostly Scream 6 and Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Both were surprisingly very good, especially the latter movie. Uh, Scream 6 is a horror movie. I know Hayden's not a horror fan, so I dabble in horror some. But uh yeah. But I was just surprised to see how Honor Among Thieves was so good in terms of the actual story itself. Considering I'm not the biggest D&D fan, but they kind of like give you when you are watching that movie, they are kind of giving you like a as this place and this character has this ties and whatnot, so you're not at a complete loss. So it's like almost like the movie became like a dungeon master that was forgiving to new players. So they're kind of like saying, okay, as dungeon master, I gotta explain some shit to you. Okay. But also at the same time, it was fun as anything to watch. Granted, during the show, I dropped my phone on a very sticky movie theater floor, so I was in my panic to look for my phone for about 10 minutes. But and I also missed the first maybe 2 minutes of the movie. But even then, the first 2 minutes of the movie, even you missed it, they're still explaining everything anyway. So it's like you didn't really miss anything. So yeah, I got caught up at work. One of the plays I ushered is now moving to Broadway. And Hayden, how about you? How was your month break?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, not too much. Saw a few movies. Um, Shazam, Fury of the Gods. It's all right. It's fun, but like it's not anything groundbreaking. It's like
It
like
is,
uh, what Brian was talking about before. Definitely feels like just a quick and easy cash grab for DC.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
The same thing with Quantum Mania,
yeah,
where like
exactly.
they know that I think they know that in the spirit of like both Quantumania and DC, it's like they need something to fill that void.
Mhm.
Specifically, the fact that uh, release wise, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 isn't coming out to May, and then after that you have Secret Invasion. So the last Marvel movie that came out was Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and so basically from November to May, you have nothing in this. Ah, thank you. My computer decided to tell me, hey, I'm okay with threats. It's like my virus thing just decided to say, oh, hey, you're okay with threats. Okay, you're good. Just randomly. It does that randomly as I'm doing something. It's like, by the
Like
way,
like a threat. Threats are random. They happen at any time. So
yes.
like bear
Uh,
attacks.
yes. Oh, speaking of bear attacks, I also saw Cocaine Bear. That
Hmm,
was an amazing experience to watch.
nice.
Uh,
Yeah,
Grant,
like yeah, both March and April, there's been a lot of really good movies, and I still need to see a bunch of them too. Like I still need to see Dungeons and Dragons, still gotta see John Wick 4. I may be seeing Super Mario uh this week,
hmm.
which is
Uh,
ironic given that we're gonna be talking about it a little bit later on in the
in a
episode
little
here.
while. And
So spoilers, but not really.
speaking of John Wick 4, an interesting tidbit came out that Keanu Reeves only said about 300 words, and most of that considered of the word yeah. So John Wick 4 happens to be the most Keanu light line in that movie, and most of those lines is considered to be yeah.
Yeah, you
So
want to? Here's how I think that meeting of that script probably went. It's like Keanu just shows up and is like, "All right, so what do you want? Do you want to see me speaking, or do you want to see me kicking ass? Because I'm thinking I'm gonna kick some ass."
yeah, but I just love how basically everyone has just turned the John Wick yeah line into basically almost like a calling card for the character, and
Very much so.
it's amazing to read. But and
Both
speaking,
that and like I saw someone do like just a fun video at their AMC theater of like falling down the stairs next to all the seats. That just such a perfect also encapsulation of John Wick movies. This dude and stairs, they don't get along.
oh yes, and but basically, yeah, when it came back to last month in terms of movies, it's like February, April. I mean, February, April. I basically just skimmed the entire month of March. No, when it came down to it, like February, March, and April are just like they are there, but most of the movies that come out are sometimes either sequels or just like the one-off type of movies that are like Christian based. Like right now,
Mm,
it's as we're filming this, Easter Sunday is almost upon us, and that's when most of the Christian movies kind of like come out for like that Easter Sunday, Easter weekend
mm,
movie, and then or even before that, and then suddenly it's just like they're kind of like just done. And
mhm.
yeah. And speaking of Easter, uh, what better time to talk about family than talk about a filmmaking family with Ron Howard and Bryce Dallas Howard. So Ronnie Howard was in the news a few days ago about talking about seeing his daughter on stage for one of her college plays. Bear in mind, this is like her first big college play. She came out of the NYU Tisch School of Acting, or is it just NY Tisch? I mean NYU Tisch.
Yeah, I think it's just NYU Tish.
NYU, because I always hear either it's NYU Tisch and NYU Tisch School of Acting. But I think they just call it
Mm.
Tisch for short. But basically,
Yeah, yeah, because when you say Tish, everyone just knows what it means. So
yeah. So, or Morticia. So it's like, no, not that Morticia.
yeah, that'd be an interesting version. It's like
First,
Morticia.
yes, but jokes aside, Ron Howard said that in one of her first plays that he saw on stage was her fully nude in that college play of hers. He didn't say what. He just said that he felt like it was on his words, a complete assault on a father's psyche, and it kind of makes me wonder what type of because it's hard because I've seen things that have my friends kind of like half naked on stage, partially naked, whatever. And it does feel uncomfortable to watch on stage when it's just like, especially as an audience member going, it's like that's one of my best friends, or that's one of my friends, and kind of like seeing them kind of like nude as they were nude as they were born. So it was like it's very like Ron Howard said, like almost like an assault on a person's psyche. But in terms of him, that's his daughter,
Mhm.
and so as a father, he'd be like, it's even more of a like even more of a weird thing because growing up, you kind of like used to changing, kids running around, all that stuff. You know, I've had stories where I ran around, half naked around my house, as a fast kid. So my parents were kind of like used to seeing me running around shirtless or something like that. And then compare that to say 30 years later whatnot, and you see your kid on stage performing in their first play, and that requires them to be fully nude, it'd be like, this is like way weirder than it should be because, like I said, as someone who has watched, you know, my friends being in that sort of like position, it is way weirder to watch considering, it's my friends, but from a
Mhm.
father's perspective, uh, it's much more it's much more of a uh weirder I think it's much more of a weirder experience because you're watching your child work, but it's also you're also watching it with probably like maybe 50 or maybe even 60 more people in the same audience with you.
Yeah, like, and this is also another thing too. It's like if it was just an actor that we don't have that kind of connection to, we're not friends with, we don't have a familiar
Yeah.
connection with, we're not going to think about that. That's the thing. But you know, like we're not going to think, oh, hey, they're naked on stage. Oh, that's weird. Like that's just not going to like that just doesn't register for a lot of people
Yeah.
because they don't have that connection, so they're not going to think about that. But it's like when it's someone who does have that connection, then they're actually kind of thinking like, oh, wait, I know this person, and they're completely naked on stage right now, or something like that. Or oh, wow, that's a lot of them. I haven't really. I'm seeing a lot of them right now.
Yes. And Ron Howard actually,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Yeah, continue.
Uh, uh, so, so I'm also just noticing how my Zoom is just being weird because I have to charge my laptop.
Yeah.
Anyway, um, see, I think it's one of those things too where it's like if you're supporting, your friends or your family and in this artistic endeavor that they're doing, and it does require them to, be like naked on stage or something like that. Like, there's not really anything you can do about that. Like, yeah, it's like I don't know. I mean, to be fair, I don't think a lot of these shows even need really people to be naked completely on stage to begin with. Like, generally, I don't see the need for it because a lot of time it just kind of come off as like you're doing it just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Like I remember in a play I was in where the director wanted these two actors at the end of the play to basically be stripped down completely because the characters were pretending to be someone else they weren't. And it's like, okay, I get them taking off the fancy clothes, but why do they also have to take off their underwear? That made no sense at all to what was going on. And it felt like it was doing it just because the director just wanted to see them naked.
Yeah. And like a good
So I
example of
think
that.
that's also another thing too with a lot of these shows. It's like at what point also I think also kind of the bigger thing here really. It's like at what point are shows that like they're doing like nudity to actually tell an artistic story, and at what point are they doing it just for the sake of doing it?
Yeah. And like reading more about what Ron Howard said, he's like, oh, he knew like this is what college is all about, about taking chances and whatnot, especially with a school like Tisch.
Mhm.
And that he said he was, she's not gonna be afraid on stage again. And that's how he like view things. So he was a proud of her of her courage to be an artist, but he's like, oh, I knew there would be nudity, but he just didn't realize it'd be full body nonstop. And that's why
Mhm.
he said it was like a complete assault on a father's psyche. And
Mhm.
again, when you see a person on stage, you know, and it's like what you just said before, where it's like there's that general link between the two is like if it's a friend of yours, especially if it's a best friend,
Mhm.
or a loved one, whatnot, it's definitely a weirder experience than to watch something as an audience member going, what the hell am I even watching? Because there was a play uh a few months ago where the character, like you said before, a character is stripped naked, and you just see all these, scars and whatnot, and it has no bearing on the story other than just saying, hey, this character is someone who is comfortable with his sexuality, but at the same time, this character is also someone who is recovering from not uh, recovering from years of sexual assault or just sexual harm and whatnot, and now he's just becoming more comfortable with sexuality. But at the same time, you're like, there has to be a point where plays like that have to come up with a now warning, yeah, warning that basically says, hey, this this play will feature nudity, mostly throughout the performance and whatnot. And yeah, it definitely feels like when you're a father watching your child like be on stage, you're so engrossed, right? But at the same time, when they are taking chances on stage like that, you're kind of like amazed at what they could do. And yeah, it definitely feels like from a person standpoint, and like from a person standpoint, uh, from like a person standpoint, from especially as a father or a parent, you're proud of your child, but at the same time, it is like a very weird experience to see your child, essentially like your offspring, just like doing this performance, and then someone is like, oh, you know, they're kind of like half naked or something like that. A good example is like, oh, if someone's doing Shakespeare or something like that, and it has to be a scene where Hamlet is giving some soliloquy or something like that in his bedroom, or and the care and for this reason, because he's in a bedroom, he is like half naked because he is more vulnerable in that state because that's like his own private domain.
Well, also
Compared.
we view like a man being half naked differently than a woman being half
Yeah,
naked. So
yeah,
there's that too.
yeah. There's that too. But when it's a woman's on stage, it's like it's always like when and there's also it's weird because last year uh and we talked about this on the podcast before. There was Take Me Out, right? Big show on Broadway at the time, because it had to deal with, there was a scene of, male frontal nudity, right? And people were able to, during the show somehow sneak their phone out of a magnetically sealed lock somehow, and and just essentially do this on stage, and take pictures of the actors on stage as a nude, compared to say when there is a woman on stage doing the same thing, and you have to look around to see, and especially if you're working as an usher or someone who works in the theater industry, to work for some and to make sure this person isn't like already recording everything, because again, it's a weird experience because as an audience member, you have to get this is this play will feature nudity, violence, gunplay, all that stuff. Themes of like whatever. That's how you have to expect have to expect from it. But from a person standpoint of from someone who's a friend or a family member, it is a much more different experience.
And speaking of weird experiences that you wouldn't really expect,
Yes. Uh,
Jordan Peele and Liam Neeson are friends. I never would have thought that, to be honest.
Yes. So, and it goes and a good segue into the next story, actually.
I
So
try.
I know. Uh, I was trying to do my best into segueing the next story, but I'm not a uh, good segue. And then you come up with your good gems every now and then. So, a few years ago, Liam Neeson was in the news, right? Long story short, he made some comments about being angry about a friend of his being assaulted on the street, and he wanted to take revenge on anybody who even fit the description of the person who had hurt his friend. Granted, this was back in the late '80s, so this is like even before he became like a big famous actor and whatnot. And flash forward to 2019, he mentions these kind of like comments. Uh, and people were like kind of like outraged, and then essentially, a few years later, Liam Neeson's kind of like on his like way into becoming back. Like, well, Well, like he didn't really slow down in terms of his movies. I think he just slowed down because one, he's in his like 70s
Mhm.
now, and he's just like he doesn't want to do all these action movies that he's been doing for the past like 10 years. So that's
Yeah,
even
because you can show he doesn't have it anymore to do the same kind of action movies he was doing when he was younger. Because I
yeah.
remember just watching a little bit of one of his recent movies, and it's like, yeah, you can see he still like he just doesn't move the same like he used to. So it's like it's very obvious they have to try and do a lot more to make up for the fact that he just cannot do the fight scenes as well as he used to.
Yeah, which is I think why he's doing a lot more comedy now, and which
Hmm.
links back to Jordan Peele. So I think even like a few years back, Liam Neeson was promoting one of his movies nonstop, where he plays a sky marshal. I'm not sky marshal, an
Air Marshal,
air marshal, sky marshal, air marshal, almost the same.
Sky
Anyway.
Marshal. You can get one from the Sky magazine, the Sky Mall magazine. We have all your needs.
And yeah, he plays an air marshal who basically says, "Oh, by the way, this flight is is under terrorist threat and whatnot," and he has to figure out who's the terrorist and all that stuff within like the span of, like say 90 minutes. And it's a good movie to watch on an afternoon. I will say that.
Yeah.
Um, and during promotion of that movie, he went on the show Key and Peele because there's a recurring joke about these two characters of like these two parking lot attendants who always joke about like what type of actors you don't want to mess with, right? And they would always say, like Liam Neeson's, right? Because they can't really say because they always say Liam Neeson's as opposed to Neeson. And and it just became like a recurring joke between those two characters. And then later, during the promotion for the show, Key and Peele had the same two characters pop up, do their thing, and then suddenly there's Liam Neeson actually making fun of himself. And it's just so amazing to watch because they did like this is like how a joke becomes like a full what's that term?
Full circle.
A joke becomes full circle by having the actual like person behind that joke kind of like make a fun of themselves and whatnot. And then and you know, flash forward a few years later, I know when we're doing a lot of flash forward and all that stuff, but again,
Our
that's how
timeline is as inconsistent as Last of Us Part 2.
take a drink, everybody, whenever Hayden decides to make fun of that game. There we go. Anyway,
Well, if it wasn't so easy.
yes. But fast forward a few years later, Neeson is, getting scripts every now and then, and he apparently Donald Glover sent him the script of a episode of Atlanta, right? His show on FX, right? And Glover was talking about how he's like, I don't know about this. I'm just trying to get, he's talking about how I'm trying to get away from like he's talking about how Leeson basically said, I'm embarrassed. I don't know if I want to talk about this. I'm trying to get away from this. And Glover's like, I'm telling you, this will be funny. You'll get lots of cream from it because it'll show that you're sorry. And he's like, even when he said, he just sent me an email saying, I don't think I could do it. Best of luck, Atlanta, blah, 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 blah. Now, he was looking, and then Glover's talking about how, you know, Liam said after the incident, he talked to Morgan Freeman, Jordan Peele, and Spike Lee. So I was like, Jordan Peele, Glover said. I hit up Jordan Peele, and he looks like, and I was like, look, man, I got this idea. He said that he trusted you, and tell me it's a good idea. Jordan thought it was hilarious, and so Jordan talked to him, and Liam got back to Glover, and from the sound of things, it's like there's that connection where it's just like that unexpected connections where it's just like it also shows you how much of a how much pull Jordan Peele has in the filmmaker community as well.
Mhm.
And like so
Yeah, it just shows that like how like just how big Jordan Peele is just moving up the industry ladder. Like from like honestly just the beginnings of like Mad TV and like Key and Peele to now doing all these horror movies that everyone's loving to getting all these like kind of like big connections. Like it's such a rise to grace for Jordan Peele. I think it's the best way to put it.
And it just shows you, like, in the episode itself, Neeson plays a fictional character, fictionalized version of himself, who meets Paperboy, played by Brian Tyree Henry,
Hmm.
at a bar called Cancel Club. And and then Neeson's basically talking about how, about what happened a few years ago, how he talked about all that, how he is sorry, he apologized if he hurt people. And this is says Paperboy still says he still fucks with Taken. And it's good to know you don't actually hate black people now. And he goes, no, 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 and
Hmm?
oh, and there's a hilarious, and well, I wouldn't say hilarious. This is like, and it, oh, and I won't ruin the punch.
Basically, without spoiling it, let's just say it's an episode worth watching.
Yes,
Just see Liam Neeson on there because
yeah,
yeah.
and they're, yeah, basically, I won't ruin the punchline because it's like it's worthwhile to watch Liam Neeson and make fun. I wouldn't say make fun, but make light about what happened, but at the same time make fun of himself as a person who kind of like hasn't been really making fun of himself over the past like 10 years because of all the action movies, and that's why he says been doing comedy.
Mhm.
And speaking of TV shows, a weird thing has just happened. The X Files is coming back again, but under new management. Ryan Coogler, the mastermind behind Black Panther and the recent Creed movies, has decided to actually do a new season of The X Files, or at least is in the process to remount The X Files with a much more diverse cast. So he's according to him, well, apparently Chris Carter, the guy who's created The X Files, he's excited for that.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's very weird because the X Files has always been a show that has been so, like, what's the term? Like episodic in terms of the case, case by case. It's like
Yeah,
they
case of the week kind of thing.
yeah, case a week. So it'll be interesting to see Kugler doing a show that's very episodic, but also having his style of filmmaking as well, and and his style of like way of, like, and the way he writes his scripts as well, because there's like a very human. I'm not saying the X Files isn't human by far. Although, have you ever hear Fox Mulder speak though? Even though he is human. Anyway, um, there was just it's just his way of filmmaking, but also his way of creating a story. And I actually can't wait to see what Coogler actually does come up with the X Files, because
Mhm.
the X Files has needed a shot of new blood into that frame of mind. And they were doing a X Files animated show called X Files Albuquerque, but excuse me. But currently, that is up in the air because they don't know if they want to continue on with a tongue-in-cheek version of the X-Files for like a adult comedy thing versus something that's already been uh put into production, where it's just like, hey, Kugler has this idea of the X-Files, let's have him essentially have free reign on that stuff. Because again, the X-Files works when it's like an episodic TV show, and then you do like a little a myth episode where it is basically about the 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 myth or the season long problem that has been, you know, constantly like kind of like in the back burner of the episode or something like that. But at the same time, the last couple of seasons of X-Files, when it came back on TV, it was well received, but wasn't really well received in the sense of, hey, these people are coming back to see watch the X-Files, but it's not really bringing in the viewership.
Mhm.
Considering, and also considering there's more people watching TV shows on streaming sites nowadays. It's like,
Yeah.
will the show also be on a streaming site, say like a Hulu or on Fox TV? And
Mhm.
Fox has shows that are surprisingly, we always joke, and there's always a joke on Fox, is like the only shows on Fox that seem to survive are shows that have past this prime. And for the past few years, they've been really taking chances on shows that really feel like, oh, these shows actually are kind of actually interesting to watch. Like I don't really watch the show that much, but when the 911 shows are on, it is interesting to watch. Specifically,
And
the
th-
like the
and they also made like a sequel show to that one as well, like the
yeah
911 Lone Star.
yeah and I think they may do another one or have done another one, or it might be just be like the two shows itself. But yeah, it's like, and
Because like
also
they're now trying to compete with like NBC's like Chicago Wednesday or something.
yeah, and the Law and Orders.
But yeah, Law and Order Thursday.
Yeah, it's like, and oh yeah, yeah, it is 911 and 911 Lone Star. I thought there was a third season that kind of like, I mean, a third show that kind of like that was hiding
Mhm.
around like the wings of the 911 verse. But
Oh, it's probably hiding. They just need to call 911 to go find it.
yes, but yeah, I just can't wait to see what Coogler is bringing to the table to the X-Files, because again, X-Files works when it's episodic and it has that one kind of like episode that focuses on like the general myth of the show, right?
Mhm.
For Mulder, it'd be like the disappearance of his sister, and then later became the cigarette smoking man. For Coogler, I could easily just see him kind of like really, really leaning into like the shadow government stuff and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
like, but again, X-Files just works when it's episodic in nature, and I think that's what really didn't make the last couple of series. I mean, yeah, a couple of seasons work because it kind of like went back into the well of it's episodic, but it's more about the myth behind the X-Files.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's definitely some new blood I can't wait to see. And speaking of new blood, Super Mario.
New blood, new movie, and
Mm-hmm.
and yet same reception as the old blood from the previous show that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Uh oh boy. So Super Mario Brothers, the movie, uh it's coming out this, or it may be already out depending on some circuits. I mean, in some markets it's already out, but in the United States it hasn't really come out yet. It might be out, tomorrow night because of special previews and whatnot. And then Friday comes out like the entire week, Easter weekend.
Hmm.
But it's getting good reviews in terms of, I mean, it's getting good traction
Yeah,
reviews.
like so the audiences are loving it,
Yeah.
but when you look at the Rotten Tomato score of the reviewers, right now it's resting at a 53.
Hmm. And people were comparing that to other kind of like Rotten Tomato scores that kind of like failed in the past, about how Rotten Tomato scores had like the first Jumanji as like being like maybe 23% or something like that.
Mm.
And of course, this was all on Twitter at the same time. So people were actually just showing their uh Rotten Tomato scores about other movies that were essentially bad, but at the same time, the audience perception was good. And I think that's the problem where it's like these Rotten Tomato scores are like, oh, this movie is like at 15% Rotten Tomato score, but the audience or is like at 80% or 90%. And just goes to show you is like, do we even care? It's like when you want to watch a movie, do you even care about what the reviews say, or do you just care about what you actually see when you actually see the movie?
Mhm. yeah, and it's like I'll say from my perspective, like like we're both writers, so so for me it's hard not to at times look at a lot of these movie stories in that like very objective writer mindset where I'm like, okay, I can clearly see that like a lot of stuff need to be reworked here when it comes to a lot of these movies that get these like not as desirable Rotten Tomato scores.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, yeah, I can definitely just be like, okay, yeah, there are problems there, there are problems there. I could definitely do this a lot. I would definitely have done this a lot differently. But at the end of the day, there are times where I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to accept that it's just a fun movie and not like give it that serious thought because it's like I'm only going to give a movie that kind of serious thought if it's actually like got something to say that's interesting and good and actually knows how to tell a story effectively well.
Yeah. And
So otherwise, I'm just like, yeah, it's crappy Rotten Tomato score. Yeah, yeah. So is Shazam: Fury of the Gods. So is Ant-Man: Quantumania. It's a lot of fun watching them.
yeah, a good example is this is people sharing like other Rotten Tomato scores, and someone pointed out the first Michael Bay Transformers movie had
Mm-hmm.
58% in the Rotten Tomato score, as opposed to the 85% of people who actually like watching it, the audience score.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like
Exactly.
you know
Yeah, that
uh
movie definitely has its problems story wise, as especially from some acting choices.
yeah
But I
so
will say, yeah, it was still very much a fun movie.
like someone pointed out Shadow the Hedgehog, the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 Rotten
Hmm.
Tomato score when it first came out. It was like when it like the first reviews gave it like 57, yeah, 56% of the Rotten Tomato score. And that's when it first like came out in terms of like the actual score itself.
Hmm.
And I have yet to watch Sonic 2 because I know the first Sonic was an amazing movie to watch.
Hmm.
But
Yep, definitely was.
it's like, are we even? It's like, are we even at a point where it's like, do we even care about watching these movies? I mean, about these Rotten Tomato scores or reviews
Hmm.
when, like, literally, like you said before, it's like currently it says 55% Rotten Tomato meter, but a 98% for the audience score.
Hmm.
It's like the audience is expecting to watch this movie, and the reviews are like, no, 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 you can't watch this movie because it's horrible. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
I think it's very much like what kind of mindset you go into when you go to watch some of these movies. Like you can go into it with like, okay, yeah, it's got a crappy Rotten Tomato score, so I'm just gonna sit here and hate it. Or you can just be like, okay, I'm going to see this movie. Audiences love it, so I can at least just try to have some fun with it and just not go into it with a negative mindset. Like, yeah, sure, it's fine to notice the flaws and problems. Not saying don't do that. Like, I definitely can't do that. Like, I still do that when I'm watching movies, but I still know how to just kind of keep that at bay and just let myself enjoy this movie in the moment and have fun with it.
And I think it just goes to show you that I think we're now more in a time where people are using Twitter more or using social media more and posting their, views and well, not, well, yeah, views, but also their reviews. Hey, that's rhymed. Their views and reviews on Twitter. And, you know, that's how more of the traction works between that. And then you have, actual reviews saying, oh, this, kind of pointing out all the analytical stuff and like, and then someone will probably like, well, I watched the same movie today and I feel like that movie actually feels a lot more better because of all those bad reviews, because it actually
Mm-hmm.
feels, kind of actually entertaining in that regard. You know, I think, at the time, Morbius, when it came out, it was like it got like rotten scores and whatnot, but audience scores were ready to go and watch it. And then once the movie came out, it was like, it kind of like slow down. But that, again, that's
Mm-hmm.
Morbius for you. You know?
And that's kind of I think that's also a bigger problem too. It's like, you know, essentially this overinflating the value of a movie before it's even out at all too.
Yeah.
Because it's like audiences, y'all haven't seen it. You don't know it's actually gonna be good or not. You're just
Yeah.
overhyped for it, and you're putting that hype into this to try and like further overhype this movie. And then actually, you're just going to actually cause a bigger problem because now you're going out of your way to overhype it. And then when people see it and then they see, yeah, it's actually not that good as all this hype, that's actually going to make the movie feel even worse.
Yeah, and like a good example of that is the fact that with Super Mario Brothers, the movie, it was produced and mainly distributed by Imagination Entertainment. The people behind, Despicable Me, the Minions movies, the recent Grinch movie with Benedict Cumberbatch, the Lorax, a few others, and people are like very used to hearing, okay, you know, Imagination is Super Mario Brothers. Granted, it's gonna look nice,
Mhm.
but there's gonna be like that imagination humor every so often. Whereas like they kind of like everyone is really, really um like they're really, really betting on like at some point there's gonna be an imagination humorist like running around. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's also the Super Mario Brothers.
Mhm.
Last time there was a Super Mario Brothers movie, which I might add still holds up, and you could quote me on that. They were still trying to make that look and feel like a Super Mario Brothers movie.
Mhm.
Compare that to say, oh, hey, we have a bunch of celebrities, and I think that was another thing where it's like the bunch of celebrities being, in that like voice caster, voice over like
Yeah,
uh
the voice cast for it, yeah.
voice cast is like, you have, Chris Pratt as Mario, Charlie Day as Luigi, who is, by the way, kind of perfect casting for Luigi.
Yeah. He
I
fits
mean,
that energy to a perfect T.
you have Anna Taylor-Joy as Princess Peach, Jack Black again,
Mm.
perfect casting as Bowser, who, by the
Mhm.
way, has been like during this promotional tour has been coming out with Bowser like attire. So Jack Black really has been becoming like almost like Bowser himself. And uh and then a few others like Keenan Michael Key as Toad, I think. Yeah, as Toad. And
And who's Donkey Kong? Was
Seth
that?
Rogen.
I thought that was Seth Rogen.
Yeah,
I
Seth
couldn't.
Rogen
I
is
wasn't sure because I knew Seth Rogen's in it, but I couldn't remember if it was Donkey Kong or someone else.
no, it's Donkey Kong. And
Nice,
again,
nice.
Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong. It feels weird, but once you hear him, I'm like, you know what? Donkey Kong
I
has
mean, I was actually sold on it when they like released that like kind of trailer thing where it's like they showed Donkey Kong like, okay, you're dead, and then punch
yeah.
Mario. I don't know why, but something about it just kind of feels satisfying
Well, it's
because it's
because
just, you know.
everyone hates Chris Pratt.
I mean, yeah, because Chris Pratt is just generic. I'm gonna say it. He is a generic actor whose
Yes.
only actually good role is doing comedies, like you know, Parks and Recreation, perfect example. He's
Parks and
only
Rec.
good at comedies and being comedic characters because dramas he cannot do. I just don't buy him as a dramatic actor.
There are some good dramatic works that he has done, like not 13 Hours. The movie that he did.
Passengers,
No, not Passengers. Fuck Passengers. Uh,
yeah, exactly. Because I'm just
oh,
trying to think of stuff he's been in, and it's like
Zero Dark Thirty. There we go. Zero Dark Thirty. He was in Zero Dark 30, and that was right before.
he was
And that
in that.
yes, he played one of the SEAL team members.
Okay, I gotta look that up because like I do not remember that.
Yeah, you don't see him he looks weird because he basically he still like has that Pratt size figure. He looks like he has that Pratt size
Hmm.
figure from Parks and Rec, but at the same time he was actually, more or less dropping that weight, and he has like a full-on
Oh,
beard and whatnot. So it's like he looks
huh.
weird, but it is him. And
Oh,
again,
okay. Oh,
Zero
okay.
Dark.
Wow, interesting. The
Yes,
more you know.
yes.
But
Um,
what's funny too, because like he actually plays a Navy SEAL in like an Amazon Prime show,
yeah,
and I like my mom was like, hey, let's watch this show. I'm like when they were in town for a bit, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll watch a little bit of it. Let's see what it is. Just the like first like 10 or so minutes of it, I'm just like, this is stupid. There's so many problems I can already tell with this. Like this does not make any sense.
Well,
Like story wise, there's already I already see about too many plot holes here.
well, I'll tell you right now, Terminal List is based off a book, so there you go. And when you're adapting a book, it's a hit and miss. Like,
Well, also because Chris Pratt is just such a fucking giant compared to all the other actors around him. And I'm just like, how does this guy not getting shot compared to everyone else getting shot? Like this dude is a much bigger target. I'm sorry, but he literally is a bigger target because he's literally like towering over everyone else in the scene.
I'm just reminded of the same problems with like Jack Reacher, where Jack Reacher has the same thing, where Jack Reacher is a big old guy, especially in the book.
Yeah.
He's like 6'7" in the book, and they got Alan Richardson, Alan Richardson, who plays the Jack Reacher in the Amazon show. And he's like similarly high. He's like maybe 6'2", 6'3", I think. And he's a big old. He's
You mean
like
John Krasinski?
huh?
You mean John Krasinski?
No. That's Jack Ryan.
Oh, I'm okay.
This is what
I'm mixing up shows now, but yeah, same.
Okay, first
Yeah.
off, yes, Amazon, you have a show called Reacher, right? And a guy named Jack Reacher, a guy named Jack Ryan. You don't think that's going to happen every so often where people like,
Yeah.
oh, this ain't the guy from The Office. This is that Aquaman guy. Who's he doing there? I mean, not the that guy, the other Aquaman guy.
Yeah. See, this is why, honestly, I kind of prefer Tom Cruise to the guy from the Jack Reacher show because you see the guy in Jack Reacher, you're like, yeah, this guy will mess you up instantly. He is literally built like it.
But Tom Cruise,
and that's
what makes it great.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you look at him, you're like thinking, okay, nah, no way this guy's gonna mess me up. And that's what makes such for a better twist when he does like, that fight scene. Like also, that's such a great fight scene, I gotta say. In like the five guys that he fights right outside the bar.
And
like that's just done well. I just love well done fight scenes.
Or the one in the bathroom where it's like, come on.
Yes. Oh my God. That is the best. Okay. That is legit the best fight scene in cinema history because of how comedic it is. It's like literally we spend like about a good 10 seconds with these idiots. They first get one good hit on him. He falls in the bathtub and they're just constantly flailing around the room. Like, and Jack's like, like Tom Cruise's character, he's just lying in the bathtub. There's like watching. There's not even having to do anything for a good like 10 seconds. And then they finally get their shit together. Pardon my French, YouTube. They finally get together, like, okay, I'll go first this time. Plunk hits the guy behind him.
Essentially. But yeah, back to my original point. Chris Pratt, he can do drama. It's just that there's people think, oh, the Chris Pratt you think could do drama is also the Chris Pratt who does comedy. So they have a lot of comedy Chris Pratt in doing that drama. And I think that's the reason why
comedy Chris Pratt is way better. And when they know how to balance out comedy Chris Pratt and trying to do a drama Chris Pratt, you get something great, like in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes. Especially volume.
But when you don't know how to balance that out, that's where you get the problems.
Yeah, that's why that's when you got Terminal List where it's like it also doesn't help that Pratt also produced the show, so he has not only the producer role, but he also has the starring role. So it's like so it's more tailor made for him. So, but back to our original point with Rotten Tomatoes scores and whatnot. I think we're at a point where do we even care about Rotten Tomatoes scores? Because I think it has to deal with like a good example would be the Dungeons and Dragons movie is like, it's like I went to go see Dungeons and Dragons, so I was like, okay, I hear good things about it, but at the same time, I know little about it, and sure enough, that is such a good movie to watch compared to the first Dungeons and Dragons movie that was so unbearable to watch.
Yeah, I think a perfect encapsulation of all of this with the scores, it's like we've gone from a time where people used to hold what critics say in such a high regard that it's actually shifted now thanks to things like social media and YouTube.
Yes.
Where even though people are like, you could say people are technically giving critical reviews and stuff on YouTube, it's actually inherently more word of mouth though, the way they go about it.
Yes,
Because of like, yeah.
but then there are kind of like YouTubers who will just shit on a movie because, a good example would be like, I forgot that, like, a good example is when you forget the name, but kind of like the type of YouTube it says, where it's just like, you know, um, The Flash,
Yeah, like
that,
they make those clickbaity kind of like titles.
or if like the Marvels will bomb. I'm like, this movie hasn't even come out yet, and people are
Hmm.
already shitting on it because they think that there's two type of YouTube critics. There's the ones who are more analytical and actually care about the movies, and then there are the clickbaity ones who are more geared towards the rageful people who are just kind of like very like mindful about. They're more geared towards the audience of who watch these clickbait article. I mean, clickbait videos. There we go, and articles, I should say, and are more and get their news that way too. Whereas it's like they
Hmm.
like literally some of these movies have yet to come out, and people are just pissed off sometimes because of that. As
Yeah,
opposed,
like there are definitely going to be disingenuous people who are going to trash on movies because they just probably don't like um
the people
the
behind
property, they don't like the studio, they just have their own
they don't
political
like the actors.
ideologies that they're more concerned with pushing instead of actually giving movies a chance.
Yeah,
But in that same vein, there's actually in the opposite direction, the same thing can happen too, where you get people going out of their way to praise something, and like what I was talking before with the overhyping, and
mhm.
sometimes this will even happen with critics too. Like again, a great example, Last of Us Part Two. It is a generic game, and people are going out of their way to give it these 10 out of 10 scores. Critics are giving it 10 out of 10 scores, calling it the Schindler's List of video games. And I'm sorry, I think that's just kind of insulting to call it that. Like, no. But the point of this being is that you get, especially with the critics who are more concerned with getting access, that they're just going to say something's great because they're more concerned with keeping their access than actually looking at something objectively.
Yeah,
So ultimately, yes, to your point, you get like disingenuous people on both sides, whether it's just random people on YouTube or even just critics. And yeah, basically a long-winded way of saying I think I'm in agreement with you. It's like, yeah, we just should not really care about these scores. Like just listen to what like your friends say too, because it's like I think that's the friends that you trust. Listen to them as well. I think that's a better way to go about it because your friends are likely not going to be the kind of people who are going to be like, going 0 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. As long
yes,
as you got good friends and you just go into a movie, try not to have expectations and enjoy the moment for what it is. And nothing wrong with being objective. If you feel that way afterwards, hey, that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But at least give the movie a chance before that.
yes, and a good way of that. The Resident Evil remake. I mean, the Resident Evil 4 remake just came
Mm-hmm.
out, and that is just a perfect game, not only from a nostalgia point of view, but from a
Mm-hmm.
of how they rebuilt everything from point of view. And replaying that, I was like, oh, it's been giving me such great memories of the actual game. And of course, people are making, and of course, there are people who are saying it's not like the game from like 2003. It doesn't have the same uh vibes and whatnot. And I'm just like,
Well, yeah, it's a new engine.
yeah, it's
Of
a new.
course, it's not going to have the same vibes. It's got a
Yes,
better engine.
yes. And that Resident Evil engine is really good. But yeah, I definitely think now is a time where people need to stop listening to the critics and actually just
Mhm.
start enjoying everything themselves, so
Yeah.
they don't feel like they're more inclined to listen to critics now. It was like 30 years ago, yes, when it was like newspapers and whatnot. Hey, it's Friday. It's Friday afternoon. I want to go see a movie. Uh, there's this new great movie called Jurassic Park coming out. I might as well go see that. Flash forward to say 20 years later, that with the advantage of social media is just like, okay, it's Friday night. I want to go see the new Jurassic World movie coming out. How are the reviews for that? Some reviews are saying it's good. Most of the people who will have seen it is bad, but I still want to go see it because again, it's Jurassic Park.
Mhm.
You know, compared to now where it's just like people are like to end the story. It's weird how it's like 20 years ago or 10 years ago, Rotten Tomatoes seemed to be an actual like an actual thing to be used as a guide to
Mhm.
now people are now like actively turning off or at least actively turning away from Rotten Tomatoes and just being like, we don't care anymore. It's just
Yeah,
it's all about the user experience.
exactly.
And speaking of user experience, I hope you all had a great episode watching today. Hopefully we won't be another. Hopefully, this won't be another month break. So hopefully next week we'll be back, or maybe even in the next week or two. But until then, please take care, be well, and yeah, take care, buddy.